They said I was born to serve. Then the truth came out. My name is Rosalind Carter, and I'm 32 years old. At my sister Elaine's engagement dinner, my father turned to the groom's family, smiled, and said, "Rosalind." He paused, like the name itself was an inconvenience. "Oh, we don't really bring her up much." My mother stepped in smoothly, the way she always did when she needed to soften an embarrassment. "She works locally," she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. "Born to serve, I suppose. It's just who she is." I kept my face perfectly still. I had spent years learning how to do that. How to hear those words and feel nothing on the outside, even when something inside me clenched like a fist. But then the groom's mother, a woman in a sharp gray suit with silver hair and eyes that missed absolutely nothing, leaned slightly forward from across the table. She looked at me directly. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something electric. "Wait," she said slowly. "You're the woman who—" She stopped. The entire room went quiet. Not the polite, conversational kind of quiet. The kind that settles into a room right before everything changes. My father's face drained of color. Slowly, like water leaving a glass. And what she said next would shatter everything my family had ever believed about who I was. But to understand that moment, you have to understand where I came from. Growing up, our family dinner table had an invisible architecture, a hierarchy so carefully constructed that no one ever had to name it. Everyone just knew. My sister Elaine sat on the right side of the table, directly beneath the chandelier. The light caught her perfectly, her posture, her hair, the trophies from her debate team competitions lined up behind her on the shelf like a shrine. I sat on the left, where the light didn't quite reach. It was 2011. I was 14. Elaine was 18, already accepted to Columbia Law School, early decision, before most kids in her class had even finished their applications. "Elaine is going to argue before the Supreme Court one day," my father said one evening, cutting his steak with the quiet precision of a surgeon. He was Dr. Edmund Carter, tenured professor of economics at Tufts University. Precision was not just a habit for him. It was a religion. He glanced at me the way you glance at a clock that tells the wrong time. "And Rosalind, well, maybe trade school. She's good with her hands." My mother, Lillian, retired headmistress of Brookline Academy, a woman who had spent 4 decades instilling in children the belief that excellence was the only acceptable standard, smiled tightly from across the table. "Not everyone is built for intellectual work, Edmund," she said. "Some people are simply more practical." Elaine beamed. I stared at my plate. I didn't hate my sister. I want to be clear about that. I never hated Elaine. What I hated was what her existence seemed to prove about mine, that I was the lesser version. The rough draft. The footnote at the bottom of a page nobody read. Elaine played violin. I liked taking apart the pipes beneath the bathroom sink just to understand how water moved. Elaine won the state debate championship. I got detention for skipping AP English to help the school janitor fix a broken boiler. That was the year I understood, somewhere deep and wordless, that I would never be what they wanted. So I made a decision, quietly, without announcing it, that I would stop trying to be. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October 2014. I was 19. Halfway through my sophomore year at UMass Amherst, studying business administration because my father had said, with a shrug, that it was practical enough for someone like you. I hated every single class. Marketing theory, corporate finance, strategic management. It all felt like being forced to memorize a language I would never speak, a language built for a life that wasn't mine. So one afternoon, I picked up the phone. "I'm dropping out," I said. Silence. Then my father's voice, cold, measured, surgical. "Excuse me. I'm dropping out. I hate it. I'm not learning anything that actually matters." I heard my mother pick up the second extension. Her breathing was sharp. Controlled anger. "Do you want to disgrace this family forever?" she asked. What exactly are we supposed to tell people? Tell them I'm figuring it out. Figuring it out? My father's voice rose, which almost never happened. Rosalind, your sister is at Columbia Law. Do you understand what you're throwing away? And for what? Because you don't like your classes. I know this isn't the path for me. If you walk away from that degree, my mother said, her voice dropping to something cold and deliberate, don't come to us. Not for money. Not for support. Not for anything. You will be completely on your own. Okay, I said. I hung up. Rain was hitting the window of my dorm room. Half-packed boxes sat on my bed. I had $1,200 in a savings account and no plan. But I had something else, a certainty, the way you're certain of your own name, that staying would cost me something I couldn't afford to lose. I moved into a studio apartment in Dorchester. Cracked ceilings. Radiators that clanged all night like someone knocking to be let in. My parents didn't call for 3 months. The downtown Marriott was hiring housekeeping staff. $13 an hour. I started the week after I moved in. The work was physical in a way that left no room for self-pity. 14 rooms a day. 6 hours per shift. 5 days a week. Strip the beds, scrub the bathrooms, vacuum the carpets, restock the minibars, check every item against the laminated checklist, move to the next room. My supervisor was a woman named Carla. Tired eyes, 3 children at home, the posture of someone who had been carrying weight for a very long time. She taught me the rhythm of it on my first day. Fast hands, steady pace, she said. Don't overthink it. Just move. I was good at it. By my second month, I was finishing 14 rooms in 5 hours instead of 8. And I started noticing things. Waste. We threw away half-used shampoo bottles every single day because corporate policy said so. Scheduling problems. Some shifts had 6 people assigned to a floor that needed 3. Other shifts had 1 person for a floor that needed 6. Equipment failures that dragged on for weeks because the maintenance team and the housekeeping team didn't communicate. I mentioned it to Carla once. She shrugged. That's just hotel life, kid. Nobody listens to the maids. I wrote it down anyway. I couldn't explain why. I just knew something was broken, and broken things could be fixed. Elaine found out I was working housekeeping when she came home for Thanksgiving 2015. I hadn't been invited to dinner. But she called me afterward. I was standing outside her Cambridge apartment building, 3 blocks away, in the November cold, watching her move around through the light of her window. Mom and Dad are upset, she said. They're telling people you're between things, but Aunt Diane asked directly, and Dad said, she paused. What did he say, Elle? He said, we don't mention her. I stood there in the freezing air. My breath made small clouds that disappeared immediately. Rose? Are you still there? Yeah. I tried to say something. I'm sorry. It's fine. It's not fine. You're my sister. Then why aren't you here? I asked. A long silence. Then, I have to go. I understood something then, something I'd been circling around for years but hadn't let myself name. I had become their secret. Their embarrassment. The thing they mentioned only when someone asked directly, and even then, only barely. So I decided, if I was going to be invisible, I would be invisible on my own terms. Over the next 3 years, 2015 through 2018, I attended maybe 5 family events. Thanksgiving once. Christmas twice. A cousin's wedding. My grandmother's 80th birthday. Each time, the script played out the same way, word for word, like they'd rehearsed it. At Thanksgiving 2016, my Uncle Paul asked what I was doing. My mother answered before I could open my mouth. Rosalind's doing cleaning work. We don't bring it up much. At my cousin's wedding in 2017, a family friend asked if both daughters were doing well. My father smiled warmly at the question. Elaine just made junior associate at one of Boston's top firms. Then the smile dimmed slightly. And Rosalind, well, we don't really mention her. At Christmas 2018, I sat at the children's table. I was 23 years old. Elaine sat at the head table, between our parents, her engagement ring, her first engagement, which would end 6 months later, catching the candlelight. My grandmother, Dorothy, a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like a hawk, leaned toward me and said, quietly, "Why do you allow them to do this to you?" "Do what?" "Erase you." I looked at her for a moment. "I don't let them," I said. "I just stopped fighting it." She squeezed my hand, firm and deliberate. "You should fight it." I stopped going to Thanksgiving after that. But I didn't stop working. I kept my shifts at the Marriott, and I started taking night classes at Bunker Hill Community College. Facilities management. Business operations. OSHA certifications. Safety compliance. Bloodborne pathogen training. I was learning to think about cleaning the way most people never do, as a discipline, as chemistry, as logistics and engineering, as a system that could be broken down, analyzed, and rebuilt better. At 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in March 2017, I sat in my studio apartment surrounded by energy drink cans, a spreadsheet open on my laptop screen, doing math. If I could clean 14 rooms in 5 hours, why did corporate allocate 8? If we discarded $6 worth of supplies per room per day, shampoo bottles, soap bars, half-used containers, that was $84 per room per week. Nearly $1.2 million annually across the hotel. And nobody was tracking it. I started making calls. Small offices, just me, a mop, a supply bucket, and a business card I'd printed at a FedEx store. Rosalind Carter. Reliable cleaning services. 3 businesses said yes. That was the moment I understood what I was actually doing. On my 25th birthday, March 14, 2018, I filed incorporation paperwork for Sterling Facilities Group, LLC. The name came from my middle name, Rosalind Elizabeth Sterling Carter. Sterling felt right. Strong and clean and professional. My first real contract was an 8,000 square foot office building in Kendall Square. $18,000 a year. I hired 3 part-time employees. Carla, who had quit the Marriott the same week I did, Jerome, a factory worker who had recently been laid off, and Amy, a college student who needed tuition money. I paid them $17 an hour, $4 more than I had earned when I started at the hotel, and promised health insurance after 90 days on the job. Carla looked at me sideways when I told her. Why? Most cleaning companies don't offer benefits. Because I wouldn't work for a company that didn't value me, I said. So I'm not going to build one. I worked 80-hour weeks. I cleaned alongside my team from 6 in the evening until midnight. Then I went home and handled payroll, invoicing, client emails, supply orders, and scheduling until 3 in the morning. My apartment smelled like bleach and exhaustion. By the end of year 1, I had 12 employees and $220,000 in annual revenue. My parents still thought I was cleaning hotel rooms. The email arrived at 9:47 in the morning on a Thursday in January 2022. Subject line, RFP, Sanitation Services Contract, Massachusetts General Hospital. I read it 3 times. Mass General was one of the highest-ranked hospitals in the country. Their current vendor had failed an infection control audit. They needed a replacement, and they needed one fast. The proposal document was 40 pages long. The contract value, $1.8 million annually for 3 years. I spent 2 solid weeks on my response. I wrote a 40-page standard operating procedures manual from scratch, covering surgical wing protocols, infection control procedures, emergency response frameworks, and ATP surface testing schedules. I included biohazard crisis flowcharts. I included employee training certificates. I included references from Boston University, where we had held a service contract for 2 years. The interview was with a woman named Catherine Ashford, the hospital's chief operating officer. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. She was in her late 50s, silver-haired, navy suit, the kind of composed authority that came not from status but from decades of making hard calls. She shook my hand firmly and gestured to the chair across from her desk. Then she opened my proposal and looked down at it. "Most vendors come in here making promises," she said. "You brought a 40-page SOP manual and a crisis response flowchart." She looked up. "Why?" "Because when a surgical wing shuts down," I said, "people die. I don't take shortcuts with things that matter." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled. "When can you start?" 3 weeks later, the call came through. $1.8 million. 3-year contract. Renewable. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my South Boston office and cried for 20 minutes. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Elaine. I just sat there in the quiet, let the tears come, and then drove home. By late 2025, Sterling Facilities Group was generating $12.3 million annually. Our client roster included Massachusetts General Hospital, $1.8 million per year. Boston University, $950,000 per year. 4 major financial district office towers, $2.1 million combined. A pharmaceutical firm at $890,000. The Four Seasons Boston at $780,000. We were ISO 9001 certified. OSHA compliant. We maintained an emergency response division trained specifically in biohazard cleanup, deep sanitation, and infection control. My South Boston office occupied 3,200 square feet. I had 8 administrative staff. On the wall behind my desk, I had framed copies of our key contracts and safety certifications, and a photograph of every single employee. I still lived in a modest 2-bedroom condo. I drove a 4-year-old Honda Civic. I owned 3 suits and rotated them. I still showed up at 5 in the morning for walk-through inspections alongside my team. And my parents still thought I worked at a hotel. In October, Elaine texted me, "Mom wants to know if you're still at that hotel job. Just tell her something so she stops asking." I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, she called again. "I'm engaged," she said. "Jonathan Ashford. He's a corporate attorney. The engagement dinner is November 15th. Mom insists you be there." I almost said no. "Please, Rose. Just this once. She'll make it impossible if you don't come." I said yes. I don't know why, exactly. Maybe because some part of me was tired of being the one who stayed away. The Four Seasons Boston gleamed under the November night sky. I had been inside this building more times than I could count, but always through the service entrance, at 5 in the morning, with my operations team for our scheduled deep clean walkthroughs. Never as a guest. I arrived by Uber. I couldn't justify spending $40 on valet parking on principle, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I knew exactly what $40 meant to the people who worked for me. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack for $89. My shoes were 2 years old, scuffed slightly at the toe. I carried a small purse, phone, ID, 1 credit card. In the lobby, Elaine stood near the elevators in an emerald silk gown. Her fiancé stood beside her, tall, confident, the easy posture of someone who had never once questioned whether he belonged in a room. My mother spotted me first. Her smile froze for half a second before settling into something polite and practiced. "Oh, Rosalind, you came. How nice." My father didn't look at me directly. I followed them to the private dining room. Cream walls, soft lighting, a long table set for 18 with ivory linens and gold-rimmed china. I recognized the setup. My team had cleaned this exact room 2 days ago. Elaine pulled me toward the other couple near the bar. "Jonathan, this is my sister Rosalind." Jonathan Ashford was 36, sandy-haired, with an easy, open smile. He shook my hand. "Great to finally meet you. Elaine talks about you." I doubted that, but I smiled anyway. His parents stood beside him. Thomas Ashford, retired judge, silver-haired and measured. And Catherine Ashford. The same Catherine Ashford who was Chief Operating Officer at Massachusetts General Hospital. When our eyes met, she held my gaze for 2 full seconds, just slightly longer than a standard greeting. Recognition stirred at the edge of her expression, but she didn't place it yet. I kept my face neutral. My father cleared his throat and gestured vaguely in my direction. "This is our daughter Elaine, and this is Rosalind." A pause, just long enough to be deliberate. "She works locally. Cleaning, that sort of thing." I took a seat at the far end of the table. The appetizers arrived. Scallops with microgreens and lemon foam. Conversation moved around me like water around a stone. Elaine's law firm, Jonathan's mergers, Thomas's golf handicap, my mother's museum volunteer work. Then someone asked. One of Elaine's friends, a woman in a Chanel jacket with perfect posture and an accent that suggested private school, turned toward me pleasantly. "And Rosalind, what do you do?" The table quieted. My father set down his fork. "Rosalind does cleaning work." He smiled apologetically. "Honest work, of course. But we don't really bring her up at these sorts of occasions." My mother laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Rosalind has always been different. Born to serve, really. It's simply her way." Elaine looked down at her plate. Jonathan shifted slightly in his seat. And from across the table, Catherine Ashford set her fork down slowly. She looked at my father. Then she looked at me. "Cleaning work," she said. Her voice was completely calm. But there was something underneath it, the way a river looks calm before you understand the current. "What kind of cleaning?" "Oh, you know." My father waved a hand. "Hotels, offices, that sort of thing." Catherine turned to face me directly. "Which company are you with?" The room felt smaller. I could feel every person at that table in my peripheral vision, the held breath, the small stillness that settles before something shifts. I could have deflected. I should have, probably. But I was so tired of hiding. "I don't work for a company," I said quietly. "I own one. Sterling Facilities Group." Dead silence. My father's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Catherine's expression shifted. Recognition moved across her face like a light turning on in a dark room, and then something closer to shock. "Sterling Facilities Group," she repeated, very slowly. "Yes." She leaned forward. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "You're that Rosalind Carter?" "Yes." "The CEO who saved our surgical wing last April?" My mother whispered. "What is she talking about?" My father blinked repeatedly, the way he always did when a student challenged him in a lecture hall and he didn't have an answer prepared. Elaine sat completely still, mouth slightly open. Catherine continued, not unkindly, but with the complete obliviousness of someone who had no idea she was detonating a bomb at a dinner table. "We had a critical infection exposure event in our surgical wing, or 4. The CDC was prepared to issue a shutdown order. I called Rosalind at 6 in the morning on a Saturday. She looked at me with something approaching admiration. By 10 o'clock, she had a 12-person response team on site with hospital-grade disinfectant and a 16-hour deep sanitation protocol running. She saved 3 scheduled surgeries that day." A pause. "She may well have saved lives." My father's face traveled from flushed red to pale gray in the span of 3 seconds. That's not possible." Catherine turned toward my parents with the calm, clear authority of someone who had spent decades running one of the most complex medical institutions in the country. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Sterling Facilities Group holds our primary sanitation contract at Massachusetts General. $1.8 million annually, on a 3-year term. ISO certified, OSHA compliant, blood-borne pathogen trained. They are one of the best vendors this hospital has ever worked with." She paused and looked at me with warmth. "I genuinely had no idea you were Jonathan's future sister-in-law. Small world." My mother's champagne glass tilted in her hand. Liquid spilled across the white tablecloth, spreading in a slow, dark circle. She didn't notice. Elaine's voice came out barely above a breath. "Rose, is this true?" "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, steadier than I expected. "I started Sterling 7 years ago. We have 180 employees. We service hospitals, universities, and corporate accounts across the region. Mass General is our largest single client." Jonathan leaned forward, genuinely curious now, lawyer's instinct, wanting all the facts. "How did you, starting at 25, from nothing?" "I worked hotel housekeeping for 3 years first," I said. "Saved every dollar. Took night classes in facilities management, safety compliance, OSHA protocol. Started with one contract in an office building in Kendall Square. Grew carefully from there." Catherine nodded. "She's being modest." She looked around the table, and her voice took on the steady cadence of someone presenting evidence. "Last April, we identified a potential multi-drug-resistant bacterial exposure in or for. If we couldn't demonstrate complete decontamination within 24 hours, the CDC would have suspended our entire surgical wing, indefinitely. I called Rosalind before sunrise on a Saturday. She looked at me. By mid-morning, her team was already running a full 16-hour deep clean protocol. ATP surface testing came back negative across all contact points at 2 in the morning. We resumed surgical operations at 6 a.m. She was quiet for a moment. "She saved us." My father pushed his chair back. "I need some air." He stood. He looked at me. Then at Catherine. Then at his wife. Then he walked out of the room. The table sat in stunned silence. Then Thomas Ashford, the retired judge who had been quiet through all of it, spoke. "That's a remarkable thing, Rosalind. Building a company of that scale from the ground up, in a field as demanding as healthcare sanitation." He nodded once, with the directness of someone who chose his words carefully. "That takes real character." "Thank you," I said. My mother's hands were trembling against the tablecloth. "But why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at her. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. "I tried," I said quietly. "When I opened my first real office, I invited you both to the ribbon cutting. You said you had a faculty event. I didn't realize. When I won the Mass General contract, I called you. You said, 'That's nice, dear,' and asked whether I'd spoken to Elaine about being a bridesmaid at her first wedding." I paused. "So I stopped trying. You had already decided who I was. Telling you things that didn't fit that story didn't seem to change anything." Elaine reached under the table and found my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Rose," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Jonathan said carefully, "Why didn't you just correct people when they assumed?" "Because they never asked," I said. "They told me who I was. We don't mention her. Born to serve. You don't argue with a verdict that's already been handed down." My mother stood abruptly, her chair scraping backward, and walked quickly toward the restroom. Catherine leaned toward me and said quietly, "I'm sorry. I had no idea I was stepping into something like this." "You didn't cause anything," I said. "You told the truth. That's all." From across the table, one of Elaine's friends, the woman in the Chanel jacket, said quietly, almost to herself, "That's actually kind of incredible." Someone laughed. The tension cracked slightly, but the weight of it remained, sitting in the center of the table like something no one wanted to be the first to touch. Catherine pulled out her iPad. "I have our vendor files here," she said. "Would it be all right if I showed them?" Elaine looked at me. I met Catherine's eyes and nodded once. She tapped through several screens, then turned the device so the whole table could see. A PDF. Massachusetts General Hospital, Facilities Services Agreement. She zoomed in on the signature page and read aloud, steadily. Sterling Facilities Group, LLC. Rosalind E. Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Contract value, $1,842,000 over 3 years. Executed November 2022. Renewed October 2025. Elaine's hand flew to her mouth. Jonathan said quietly, "Oh my God." My father appeared in the doorway. He had come back. He saw the iPad. He saw the contract on the screen. His face went the color of ash. He sat down heavily into his chair. Catherine scrolled slowly through the document. Scope of work, staffing requirements, emergency protocols, narrating in that same calm, clear voice. Scope of services, daily sanitation of 12 floors, including 4 surgical wings, 3 intensive care units, and 2 research laboratory spaces. Emergency response protocols covering biohazard cleanup, infection control, and full or deep cleaning. 42 dedicated staff members assigned to Mass General alone, all background verified, HIPAA trained, and certified under current CDC guidelines. She looked up at my father. "Your daughter runs a very tight operation, Dr. Carter." He said nothing. Elaine was staring at me like she was meeting me for the first time. 42 people, she whispered. Just for one contract. 180 across all contracts, I said. Catherine opened her email on the iPad. She typed my name into the search bar. 47 results came back. She opened one at random, an email from the previous April, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. She read it aloud. Catherine, team deployed at 10 p.m. or 4 deep clean confirmed complete as of 2 a.m. ATP testing negative across all surfaces. Bleach protocol executed per CDC guidelines. Room cleared. You are clear to resume surgeries at 6 a.m. RC. She turned the screen toward the table. 2:17 in the morning, she said. That is the kind of partner you want. Someone who answers before dawn and doesn't stop until the work is done. Elaine's voice was barely audible. You were there. At 2 in the morning. I was in that room with my team, I said. I don't ask people to do what I won't do myself. Jonathan had his phone out now, typing quickly. He read from his screen, my LinkedIn profile, the Boston Business Journal piece from the previous year. He looked up. Rose. This is... I don't even know what to say. My mother came back from the restroom. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. She saw the iPad, the phone, the evidence scattered across the white tablecloth. She lowered herself into her chair as if her legs weren't entirely reliable. I don't understand, she said. Why didn't you ever tell us? I set down my fork carefully. My hands were not shaking anymore. I did tell you. 3 years ago, I invited you to our office expansion opening. You had a faculty dinner. 2 years ago, I sent you the Boston Business Journal feature. You replied, "That's nice." Last year, I called to share news about a major new contract, and you asked me to talk to Elaine about being in her wedding party. I let that sit for a moment. So I stopped. I looked at her steadily. You had decided years ago who I was. The dropout. The embarrassment. The one who cleaned hotel rooms. And I realized it didn't matter what I built or what I achieved, you had already made up your minds. So I built it for myself, and for the people who work for me. Not for you. My father's voice came out low and uneven. That's not fair. Isn't it? I looked at him. You told people you don't mention me. You introduced me at this very dinner as someone who does cleaning work, in the same tone you might use if I'd failed out of a rehabilitation program. You said, in front of strangers, that I was born to serve. I paused. What exactly was I supposed to conclude from that? Elaine was crying now, silently, tears running straight down her face. I'm sorry, she said. Rose, I am so sorry. I know. My father pushed back from the table. I need to. He looked at me. He looked at the iPad screen, still displaying the contract. He looked at his wife. Then he stood and walked out of the private dining room. This time, He didn't come back to the table. The other guests began making polite excuses, Elaine's friends, a few cousins who had gone very quiet. Within 20 minutes, the room had emptied until it was just me, Elaine, my mother, and the Ashfords. Catherine approached me near the door. "I truly am sorry," she said quietly. "I had no idea I was stepping into something this complicated." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You told the truth. That's always been all I wanted." She hugged me, quick, professional, but entirely genuine. "You are one of the best partners this hospital has ever had," she said. "And from what I witnessed tonight, you are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Jonathan shook my hand. "If you ever need legal counsel, anything at all, call me. Pro bono." I almost laughed. "Thank you." The room was nearly empty now. Just me, Elaine, and my mother. My mother sat frozen, staring at the tablecloth. Not crying anymore. Just still. Elaine stood. "Can we talk? Just the two of us." We walked to a quiet corner near the tall windows. Below, the street was glittering with headlights and the amber glow of street lamps. Boylston Street in November, always busy, always moving. "I owe you more than an apology," Elaine said. Her voice broke slightly. "I let them erase you. I stood there while they called you the dropout, the embarrassment, and I didn't fight hard enough. I told people you were still figuring things out, like that was a kind thing to say. Like it was true." She wiped her face. "But you were the brave one. You were always the brave one." I didn't say anything. I did everything they asked. She continued, almost to herself. "Law review. The firm. The cases. And half the time I'm miserable. I hate merger law. I hate my supervisor. I'm 35 years old, and I have never made a single significant choice that wasn't first approved by someone else." She looked at me. "You made every choice yourself. That terrified me. And I think I resented you for it." "You can still choose differently," I said. "It's not too late." She nodded, tears still falling. Then she hugged me, a real hug, not the polite half gesture we had practiced for years. She held on. "I love you," she whispered against my shoulder. "I should have said that so much more." "I know. Do you forgive me?" I thought about that, honestly. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I want to." My Uber driver was a quiet man who didn't ask questions when I got in with tears running down my face. He glanced at me in the mirror. "You okay, miss?" "Yeah," I said. "I will be." Boston blurred past the window. My phone buzzed. "Elaine, please don't give up on us. I know we don't deserve it. But please. I love you." I turned off my phone. I needed silence. I had spent years imagining what this moment might feel like, the moment I was finally seen. I had imagined triumph, vindication, the clean, bright feeling of being recognized at last. Instead, I felt hollow. I had proven I was enough. But I wasn't sure I still had what I had been trying to prove it to. Maybe I never had. Elaine called Sunday morning. I almost didn't answer. "Rose, please just listen." I listened. "Mom and Dad want to talk. There's a brunch at the house this morning. Grandma Dorothy, Uncle Paul, Aunt Diane, everyone. They know something happened Friday night, but they don't know what. Mom asked me to ask you to come. I know you don't owe us anything. I know that. But please." I looked at my laptop screen. Staffing schedule to finalize. 3 invoices to review. A safety training session to prep for Monday. "Catherine and Thomas are coming as well," Elaine added. "I invited them." I paused. "Why would they come?" "Because Catherine called me yesterday and said, 'Your sister deserves witnesses.' So I asked them, and they said yes." I closed my laptop. "I'll be there." The table was set for 12. Grandma Dorothy sat at the head. watching everything with the precise, patient attention of someone who had seen a great deal of life and lost very little of her clarity. Uncle Paul and Aunt Diane stood near the coffee service, speaking quietly. Aunt Diane saw me first and crossed the room. Eleanor said there was some kind of misunderstanding at the dinner Friday. Something like that, I said. My father walked in from the hallway. He saw me. He stopped. His eyes were red. He hadn't slept. I could see that from across the room. Rosalind. His voice was rough. Dad. We stood there for a moment, two people who knew each other's faces and almost nothing else anymore. He gestured toward his study. Can we talk? Privately. I followed him. The study was the same as it had always been. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, economics texts, policy theory, academic journals. His PhD diploma from MIT on the wall. Beside it, framed photographs, Elaine's college graduation, Elaine's law school acceptance letter, Elaine at her first communion. I wasn't in any of them. He closed the door and turned to face me. I looked you up, he said. His voice had lost its precision entirely. Your company, the contracts, the articles, the certifications. He stopped. You did this completely alone. I had people who helped me, I said. Just not you. He flinched as though I had struck him across the face. I'm sorry, Rosalind, he said. I don't know what else I can say. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough yet, I said. But it's a place to start. We returned to the dining room. Brunch had begun. Bagels, lox, cream cheese, fruit. Casual conversation. People pretending the air wasn't still thick with everything that had happened Friday night. Then Catherine, seated next to Grandma Dorothy, said easily, Rosalind, I was telling Dorothy about the emergency response in April. She asked me to tell her the whole story. Grandma turned to my father. Her voice was very calm. Edmund, what exactly is this woman talking about? My father set down his coffee. Rosalind owns a company, he said. A very successful one. We didn't know. Grandma's eyes narrowed. Didn't know. Or didn't ask. Nobody answered. Uncle Paul broke the silence. What kind of company? Facilities services, I said. Sanitation and infection control, hospitals, universities, corporate clients. How established? Aunt Diane asked. 180 employees, Catherine said. 12 million annually. ISO certified. One of the finest vendors Massachusetts General has ever contracted. Uncle Paul's eyebrows rose. Rosalind, that's extraordinary. Grandma folded her hands on the table with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had known something for a long time and was only now being proven right. I always knew that girl had steel in her. My mother stood. The table went quiet. Her voice shook, but she kept going. I spent 40 years teaching children that their worth came from their degrees and their titles. I believed that completely. I taught Rosalind that intellectual work was superior to manual work. That service was something to be ashamed of. She looked at me directly. I was wrong about all of it. She built something real, something that employs families, that keeps hospitals running, that matters in ways I never thought to measure. And I couldn't see it because I was too busy measuring her against a standard that had nothing to do with who she actually was. She pressed her lips together. I'm sorry, Rosalind. Truly. I am so sorry. The table was still. Elaine put her arm around our mother. Catherine reached over and quietly squeezed my hand. I looked at my mother. I forgive you, I said. But I'm going to need some time. She nodded, eyes filling again. I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need. Grandma Dorothy reached across and patted my hand. Now, she said, tell me everything. From the beginning. So I did. I told them about the Marriott. About the night classes and the OSHA certifications. About the first FedEx business card and the 3 offices that said yes. About Carla and Jerome and Amy and the 177 people who had joined us since then. About the Mass General contract and the for crisis and working until 2 in the morning on a Saturday because 3 scheduled surgeries depended on our floor being clean. Uncle Paul said, "You employ people who depend on you for their livelihoods. That is the definition of leadership." Aunt Diane said, "And you built it without a single dollar of help from them." She glanced at my parents. "That makes it even more remarkable." Catherine added, "I've worked with dozens of contractors over the years. Most treat their employees as interchangeable parts. Rosalind treats hers like they matter, because she knows what it feels like to be treated like you don't. That is why her company succeeds where others fail." My father sat silently through all of it, staring at his untouched plate. After brunch, he asked if he could see the office. We drove there together in his car. 20 minutes. Mostly quiet. I showed him the operations floor, the supply room, the equipment storage, the training room where every new hire learned our safety protocols before they ever set foot in a client facility, the administrative floor where 8 staff members managed scheduling, payroll, contracts, and compliance for 180 people across the region. He moved through the space slowly, reading framed certifications on the walls, studying the floor plan maps, running his hand along the edge of a supply cabinet. He stopped in front of the employee board. 180 photographs. Names. Start dates. The faces of people who showed up every day because the company they worked for showed up for them. "Do you know all of them?" he asked quietly. "All of them," I said. "And their children's names." He stood there for a long time. Then he touched the edge of a framed contract. The Mass General Agreement, the one Catherine had read from at the dinner table Friday night. "I had no idea," he said. "I know," I said. He turned around, and he hugged me. First time in 7 years. His arms were thinner than I remembered. His wool jacket smelled the same as it always had. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have been saying that for years. I'm so sorry I wasn't." I let him hold on. In mid-December, I invited my parents to Sterling's annual holiday party. My father had come down with a flu that week and couldn't make it. My mother came alone. The party was low-key by design, employees and their families, pizza and sodas and a secret Santa exchange, children chasing each other around a rented community center in Dorchester. Nothing fancy. That was intentional. My mother stood near the wall for the first hour, watching, taking it all in. Carla, my very first hire, now my director of operations, walked over and introduced herself. "You're Rosalind's mom?" "Yes." Carla smiled. "She's something else. Last year, she covered my daughter's dental work, said it was a performance bonus. I know it wasn't in the budget." She shook her head. "She just takes care of people." My mother's eyes filled. Later, she pulled me aside near the food table. "You are a better person than anything I taught you to be," she said. I shook my head. "You taught me more than you realize. You taught me exactly what I didn't want to build. That matters too." She laughed, a real laugh, small and sad and genuine, the first honest one I had heard from her in years. Elaine proposed it, a second Thanksgiving, in late December, at my parents' house. A second chance. A reset. I agreed, on one condition. I was bringing 2 of my employees. Carla. Jerome. Both single parents. Both with kids. Carla's daughter Maya was 7. Jerome's son Dante was 9. My mother set extra places without a word of hesitation. My father got down on one knee near the couch to talk to Dante eye to eye. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Dante grinned the way only a 9-year-old can, like the answer was obvious and the question was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Like Ms. Carter," he said. "A boss who's actually nice." My father looked up at me. Something broke open in his face. Slowly, like a window cracking along a line that had been there for years, just waiting for the right amount of pressure. We ate together. We told stories. We laughed, not the polished, managed kind of laughter that had always characterized family dinners in our house, but something rougher and more real. It wasn't the family I had spent years grieving, but it was the family I was actively building, and that felt like more than enough. Elaine and I stood side by side in the kitchen afterward, cleaning up the way we used to as kids, passing dishes back and forth without needing to say much. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up on us." I didn't answer right away. I kept drying dishes. "I didn't do it for you," I said finally. "I did it because I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying that anger. It's too heavy." She nodded. "Then thank you for that," she said. It is December 20th, 2025. Sterling Facilities Group just signed a lease on a second regional office, this one in Providence, Rhode Island. We are hiring 40 additional employees. My father calls every Sunday. We talk for 20 minutes, sometimes 30. Mostly about the business at first. Slowly, about other things. My mother now volunteers with Sterling's annual holiday toy drive. Elaine left the firm 3 months ago. She is working at a non-profit doing immigration law, work she actually chose, for reasons that are actually hers. She sounds different on the phone. Less careful. More like herself. It isn't perfect. It will probably never be the family I imagined when I was 14, sitting on the wrong side of the table in the shadow where the chandelier light didn't quite reach. But it is real. And real is something. 4 years, I accepted the story they told about me. That I wasn't enough. That service was something to be ashamed of. That because I worked with my hands rather than my mind, I had chosen a smaller life. I learned the truth the hard way, in my own time, on my own terms. Service is not shameful. It is structural. It is what holds everything else up. The hospitals that save lives, the universities that shape minds, the buildings where the work of the world gets done. None of it functions without people who understand how to keep it clean, safe, and running. I built a company that does that. I built it from a $1,200 bank account and a hand-printed business card and years of showing up before sunrise. I built it with people who had been overlooked the same way I had been, and I paid them well, and I gave them benefits, and I showed up beside them when the work was hard. That is a legacy. No diploma can manufacture it. No title can replace it. My parents measured me with the wrong tools for a very long time. And it cost us both years we cannot get back. But I am not bitter about it anymore. I walk into rooms now as myself. Not the dropout. Not the maid. Not the family member we don't mention. Just me, a woman who built something that matters, quietly, without their permission or their approval. That is enough. More than enough. If your family has ever looked at what you were building and seen only what it wasn't, if they measured you against a standard that was never designed to fit who you actually are, if they made you feel invisible for so long that you started to wonder if they were right. I see you. You are not the story they told about you. You don't need their approval to start. You never did. The quiet ones, the ones who work without applause, who build without recognition, who keep going without anyone watching, we are the ones who change things. Start anyway. Share your story in the comments. Let's build something together.